Hi, everybody. Welcome to Spinning and Weaving Week 2020 here at SchachtSpindle.com. Today, I am interviewing Felicia Lowe, the famous Felicia Lowe of Sweet Yarns, and we are so happy to have you here. So do you want to start by telling us how you juggle your day job, which is running the business of SweetGeorgia.com and its accompanying school, School of Sweet Georgia, with your artistic passion to make things? Does this overlap in your day job and your art help you, or does it hurt you?
Is a very good question. I think it's a very much an ongoing challenge that I've been having. So I think you guys know that I started the company back in 2005, and building this hand dyeing yarn company has taken, a long time. But then along the way, I was able to build a team, and the team helps me with a lot of the everything from social media and marketing and dyeing and shipping and all of this kind of stuff. I am extremely lucky to have this amazing team that makes a lot of the yarn things happen. And then at home, I also have I'm very, very lucky to have a very wonderful, understanding, accommodating husband who also appreciates all of the things that I have to juggle and all the things I have to do. But it is definitely an ongoing challenge trying to do all of these things and also trying to do and make the things that I like to make. It definitely, it has been sort of an ongoing challenge, because I think one of the things that we have problems with is just trying to find those boundaries. Like, at what point in time does work end and play start? Because if I weave for work or I dye for work, but I also weave for fun, where do you draw the line? Because I have my looms here at home. I'm weaving projects for teaching at home, but then at what point in time do we say, well, now I'm weaving for fun? And so that is definitely an ongoing challenge. I think many years ago, I interviewed Jane Patrick for her book, which was called Time to Weave. And she gave me the advice, oh, you can wake up really, really early in the morning to get your weaving done, because that's what she did in order to write the book. And you can tell Jane, I still haven't been able to get up early to do that. I'm definitely more of a night owl. I think I stay up late to end up doing a lot of these kinds of things and working in the dark. But yeah, it's been a bit of a challenge.
Do you ever find sometimes that if you've got to make a project or work on a project or design a project, that you almost start to resent it a little bit because you would rather be, because it's something you have to do for work, and you'd rather be just messing around having some fun with your loom or your wheel or design
Yeah,
board or
so
something?
yeah, that's been a thing too, right? I think sometimes the things that I want to make are not necessarily projects that would have mass appeal. So I want to teach projects, and I want to teach people how to weave. I want to teach people how to spin and how to dye. I want to bring a lot of people into the fiber arts. There's just kind of a barrier, because it feels like, oh, I could never do that. So I want to do things where it encourages people and makes people feel like, oh, I could do that too. And encourage them to want to make these things. And so I try to find projects that are appealing and things like that. But it has to also sort of overlap with things that I will find exciting and interesting. But some of the things that I want to do are, working with very, very, very fine yarns, like weaving with tons of very fine lace yarns, or painting warps, or doing things that require more commitment and more motivation, more than could easily be conjured up. I think, yeah, there's a lot of desire for quicker and easier projects, because then you think you can accomplish it, you think you can do it. And the things that I want to do, if I say, oh, we're going to sit down and we're going to thread 800 warp ends today, nobody wants to watch me do that, right? That's yeah.
Though the speeded up video of that could be so cool.
Yeah, it would be over weeks.
Right. But I think you're right. People would look at the time commitment involved and just go,
Not for me. Yeah.
yeah. So you do it all. You dye, you spin, you weave, you design, you photograph, all this other stuff. Plus you run the business and the online school, and all of that involves selling and promoting and teaching and all these crafts. what's your next project and how will you make time for it? And is this maybe the perfect lead in to talk about your newest workshop series on multi-crafting?
Yeah, so I did just put out a little workshop series that we're offering to everybody. It's for free. You can download the PDF with the all of the text of the videos, or you can watch the videos, all of that kind of stuff. But basically, I go through a lot of the pain points of people who love to do spinning and weaving and knitting and dyeing, like all the fiber arts, and being able to juggle all of those activities. And so, you know, like if you're busy knitting, your hands are not available to spin, you're not available to weave, you know, but you want to do all these things and you feel very overwhelmed by the desire to do all these things, but not having enough time or money or energy to do all of the things. So I wrote 10,000 words to explain sort of how I juggle all of these different things that I enjoy doing. So I think, you know, with juggling the business and with juggling the school, I think I absolutely been very lucky to have team, you know, with people able to help with a lot of that stuff. With building the school right now, that is a huge focus for me. So that's kind of like the big project that's on my plate right now. You guys probably know that we're also moving our studio. So we're moving our studio from a space that's currently about 2,000 square feet to a space that's going to be 5,000 square feet. And the space is designed for us to have like a much bigger fiber arts studio in there, so that way we can film, so that we're not filming in my attic all the time, because it's really hot here in the summer and nobody
Oh,
wants
yeah.
to be here in the summertime. So that is kind of like a big project that's on my plate right now, is like setting up that studio, making more courses, doing more teaching, all of that. But then on top of all of that, I started, like we're talking about work projects versus personal projects. I started a personal project called Low Meets Loom, maybe about a year ago on Instagram, because I was just feeling like I want to weave things, and I want to weave things that are not necessarily things that I need to teach about, or that they're not necessarily Sweet Georgia things. They could be like other yarns, other patterns, whatever it is. Like there was a whole bunch of stuff that I wanted to do around weaving. And so I kind of followed that path and set up a little Instagram account to share what I'm doing on that side of things. And I would like for that to become more of a thing. I just don't know how I'm going to fit it in right now. But, you know,
What? You surprised me.
I know I have to wake up early now. That's the plan,
Yeah.
right? To wake up 2 hours earlier.
Oh, golly. Yeah, because it's really hard to pack in the dark. I have learned over my own life. Wow. So your earliest training was not actually in textile arts, am I remembering correctly? It was in chemistry and graphic design and photography. So how did you get started in textile arts? Was it before or after you launched Sweet Georgia, or am I asking a chicken and egg question?
Yeah, so I started in, I guess, textile arts when I was a kid. I learned how to knit when I was in elementary school. I learned how to sew when I was in elementary school. I used my mom's sewing machine. I made myself a skirt, and it was all because, you know, after dinner, we were all kids. We were sitting around on the floor in the living room, and I remember watching my mom cut out the fabric to sew herself a dress.
Mhm.
And I don't know why, like that memory is so vivid and so it just stuck in my mind so much. And it really intrigued me to learn how to sew my own clothes. And from sewing your own clothes, and the knitting came, and I sewed my own clothes all through high school. It was very back and forth, back and forth. And then I dropped a lot of those things when I went to university, and I studied pharmaceutical science, like you were mentioning. And then when I came out of school, one of my girlfriends from kindergarten, she was pregnant, and that was like the first person that I ever knew that was pregnant. And I was like, I know how to knit. I can make her some baby booties. And so
Oh,
that's when I picked up knitting again. And then it kind of spiraled into, you know, knitting, became learning how to spin, became learning how to dye, became learning how to weave, and then on and on and on. So that's kind of where all of that came from.
where does Sweet Georgia fit into this timeline? I mean, many people, I think, who get passionate about a craft the way you have suddenly go, you know what, I want to quit my day job and just knit for a living or open a dye studio. And was that how it happened for you?
No. I mean, I love to knit back in grade 7, but there was no guidance counselor that was going to tell you that, oh yeah, you can definitely make a career as a knitting person. Like that was never going to happen. So I worked in pharmacy. I sat down in school, first day of school in university, and I knew that I was in the wrong place. Like that was not my people. It was just not my community. But I am a bit of a completionist. So because I started, I thought, well, I'll just finish, even though it was very long. It was 5 years. And then I moved away from pharmacy into graphic design, and I did a lot of client work. I did website development for people. I did graphic design for clients. And I started that business while I was still in university studying pharmacy, because I just didn't, I didn't click with the pharmacy. And so I was finding other more graphic, more visual ways of working. So I started this business then, and then gradually transitioned out of pharmacy, and then gradually transitioned to a full-time working as a graphic designer and having my own clients and everything. And I think that working 100% on digital projects all the time really made me crave that tactile nature of the fiber arts that I was missing out on. So when I picked up knitting again and started getting into spinning and dyeing, and I was doing all these things on the weekend, and I had this knowledge of like making websites. So I started a blog writing about, what I was making, and then eventually it kind of like transitioned. So I've always had sort of like one foot on one side and then going to the next thing, and then very gradually transitioning over to the next thing. Yeah, it's a better way of doing it than saying, I'm going to quit my day job and I'm just going to do this.
Well, because you had the business experience. I mean, if you had tried to launch Sweet Georgia without that business experience, what might have happened?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I because there are a lot of indie dyers out there, but I think you have to reach a certain volume of business before it becomes break even, let alone profitable.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, it's quite a challenge, I think, to run this as a business, to run something that's so labor intensive, I think. And everybody who's doing it, like you pour your heart and soul into making something like this. It definitely, it takes a lot of energy, a lot of motivation, a lot of commitment for sure, to like see it all the way through, because it's not easy. Yeah.
Especially when you have two small children, and I my hat's off to you. I this. Um, I'm going to segue into a rather long question that's got a little bit of backstory. You mentioned people who say, "Oh, I could never make that," and I too have always been wearing stuff that I've sewn or knitted or whatever, and people say that to me all the time. And my instant response is, well, yeah, you could if you actually really wanted to. If you got the training, you could probably do it. So I consider myself more of a recreator. I don't come up with original ideas. I see somebody else's pattern and go, oh, I want to make that in that yarn, or oh, I want to tweak this design around because I need to cover up my bowl full of jelly or my skinny arms or whatever. But then there's you, and there are a bunch of people like you who I consider to be actual artists. You're used to starting from nothing and designing. How do you advise recreators to start thinking more like artists, like originators, like creators?
Well, thank you. That's very nice. That's very flattering, actually. Well, there's a couple of things. I think that I very often, like when I'm teaching, I encourage people to look at things with the end goal in mind. I encourage people to be really intentional about what they make. Like think about what it is that you want at the end of the day, and then focus your energies and resources and attention on making that thing. I don't often take my own advice. I think this is why I give this advice, because it's like advice that I need. But I very often look at the materials and look at what is around me, and I'm like, oh, like I was telling you about the fiber that we dyed for Schacht recently, and this is Polworth and silk. And I don't think that these are necessarily my colors or anything like that, but they look so pretty and the fiber looks so like fluffy. I was just like, I have to spin it. And so I think that I go into a lot of these creative things without necessarily having that final end result in mind. I'm going in with just, oh, I want to touch that thing. Oh, I want to play with that color. Oh, I want to feel this thing. And so I kind of follow that, and then getting to the point where, okay, now I have some yarn, but I don't know what to do with it, right? I think a lot of people end up in that place as well. And so when you're talking about originating things and creating things, I think that the best advice I can give is to set yourself some boundaries. And I think that those creative constraints are very helpful for making decisions about what you're going to make. Like I was saying before, when I worked in digital design, any color is available at any time. You want to make it whatever size, you make it whatever size you want. Like there's no constraints to what you can build. But with, you know, with the fiber arts, this is one braid of fiber.
Yes.
I can make, you know, only so many things with one braid of fiber.
Yeah.
I could make this into a pair of socks. I could make it into just the warp for a scarf. If I have 2 skeins of sock yarn, I can make a scarf, but I can't make a sweater. So like the physical constraints of what you have available to you can help dictate where you can go with a design idea, right? So that's kind of where I start from.
Interesting. And of course that was supposed to be the question before this one in the order of things, that you're creating raw materials to use in another craft. And I was going to ask if you started your projects with the raw materials in mind or with the end product in mind, and you do the one, but you advise the other.
Yeah, because I think I am that, you know, like they talk about fiber arts people and the continuum of what people like. I am the color and texture person.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm just the color and texture person. So I'm attracted to like colors that speak to me, even colors that I don't necessarily look good in or want to wear, but colors that they're just, they call to me. And so I'm like, oh, I have to work with that color. Or, you know, silk that's shiny. It's like, oh, I want to work with that texture. And so those kinds of things pull me into creating something with that. I don't typically start with things like weave structure first, or deciding if I'm going to make a sweater first, or those kinds of things. I just like playing with the materials.
That makes perfect sense. And I think many spinners would agree that they too have either a closet full of braids waiting to be spun, all dyed in beautiful colors, or a whole bunch of yarn that's been spun and it's sitting there waiting.
Yeah. So I think that that's definitely like another pain point to address, is like, well, you know, how do we take this basket full of randomly spun, hand spun, and how do we transform it into something that it makes you feel like your time was worth it, that you came out of something with an outcome that you're proud of, right?
Well, I mean, do we need to approach yarn as an end in and of itself? Like sometimes the making is really the point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you've got a closet full of hand spun yarn that's still in skeins. Is that okay?
Absolutely okay.
Because
I'm staring at one right
now.
now.
Right? I'm pointing to my collection up in my living room, and yet. And that seems to be, to me, one of the biggest blocks a lot of spinners get to. Because people always ask them, what are you going to do with that?
Mm.
Say that to knitters. They don't say that to weavers. They don't say that to crocheters. They say it to us. They say it to spinners.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't seem to like the, I don't know, sort of answer, or, you know, does that matter? That answer also doesn't seem to elicit much joy from non-spin.
No, you know, like last year, I think we put out a course with a spinner, Diana Twist. She's a local spinner here, spins beautiful spindle spun yarn. And she brought this, is it a blanket or a poncho? I can't remember, but it was a beautiful, beautiful hand woven project that she had made with all spindle spun yarns, like small bits of spindle spun yarns from all over. And it was gorgeous. And so sometimes like it It reminded me that you don't have to like spin one braid, make one thing, spin one braid, make one thing. And you can amass this collection that becomes your stash of raw materials for making other things. And maybe those things that you've spun, maybe it becomes a sweater, maybe it becomes a blanket. But there's like, you look at that stash as a place of possibilities. And so you don't have to rush to make anything. I think it's okay to let things sit and marinate for a bit.
Well, using smaller collections of fiber or yarn, maybe in different colors, to make a larger thing is the perfect segue into my next question.
Oh.
It's like we're on the same wavelength or something, which is teaching color. What's the biggest hurdle you encounter when you're trying to teach color, and especially with people who have told themselves all their lives, oh, I'm not an artist, or oh, I'm not very good with color? How do you advise people to embrace color?
So yeah, I absolutely have noticed that people are scared to mix colors. Like people have problems picking colors and then combining colors and mixing colors. So in the workshops where I have like physically been in the room with people teaching people how to dye yarn, I can, like, these workshops are always out of town, so I can only physically bring so much dye. So I
Mm-hmm.
bring some basic colors, primary colors, and then I encourage everybody to not use the dyes straight from the dye stock, but mix them to make your own colors and then apply them. And I've observed that people are very hesitant to do that, very nervous to mix dyes to create their own colors. I think they're worried that they'll mix the wrong colors or that they'll get something that they don't like. And so I think that this is an exercise that I learned many years ago from Michelle Whiplinger, but it's something so easy. And it's basically just to use very inexpensive watercolors. You can get
Yeah.
watercolors from wherever, very inexpensive set, and then just intentionally mix muddy colors. Like figure out how to make colors that are muddy. And once you know how that is created, then you can either choose to work towards it or choose to avoid it. But whatever you want to do, like you can experiment with mixing and blending very inexpensive watercolors. It doesn't affect your stash. It's not going to like diminish your resources or anything like that. But give yourself that opportunity to explore and play with the colors. Because yeah, that's a really low barrier way to experimenting with color and seeing what you like and don't like.
You mentioned wrong color. I mean, are there wrong colors?
No.
Can't the wrong color become the right color given its context?
I don't think there's anything such thing as a wrong color. I think everybody has judgments about what they like and what they don't like. So, like I even like Leah, who edits our videos for the school, she often says that she loves blue, like everything, like blues and purples, like that's her thing. And so if you were to approach her with maybe like a moss green or like an olive green, that might not go over so well. So it's a lot of personal preference around, what colors, maybe because of what you think might look good on you, those kinds of things. So, but ultimately, I don't think there's any wrong colors because you can always mix and combine and subdue certain colors. You can bring other colors forward. You could use an olive green and mix it with a palette of blues, and that could, create some depth to it so it's not so
Yeah.
one-dimensional. Like there's lots of different things that you could definitely do.
So does your closet, it sounds like your coworker, Leah, has a closet a lot like mine. It's all blue. Your closet monochromatic, or do you play around with color more in your wardrobe?
Oh, I try. I really try. At one point in time, all I wore was black. I think that was like during high school and university. I wore a lot of black. And then one of my closest friends, she's like, you got to stop doing that. She's like, it doesn't look good. Oh, okay. And then I started to, be a little bit more, wear more vibrant colors. Yeah, for sure. But my closet, I do tend to fall into a rut too. I have a lot of plums, a lot of purples, a lot of burgundies, a lot of those kinds of colors in my closet. And I really try to actively, mix and match and blend and find different ways of, I love yellow, but I can't wear yellow. I love yellow though.
I'm in the same boat, and everything I've been dyeing lately has been yellow. But as an accent color in
Yeah.
Fair Isle or an accent in the warp or the weft, it can really liven everything up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you just have to embrace it.
Exactly.
And it seems to me, especially when I'm knitting or weaving or whatever I'm doing, you also have to be willing to unpick it. If it turns out it's not working, then stop, undo it, and do something else, because
Hmm.
something you hate seems like a really bad idea to me.
Yeah. Make things you love.
So, or over diet.
Hmm.
So, oh, okay, I think I've just got one more question because we've been talking for a while now, and but this might get long and involved. How can textile people best encourage crafting, especially in younger generations? And how can we help people afford the equipment and the materials, which, as we all know, can get a little pricey? In other words, how are we going to perpetuate the textile community, and how are we going to make it as inclusive as possible?
Yeah, I think that very much a lot of stuff is about accessibility, right?
Yeah,
So it's the accessibility to knowledge, which is something that we're trying to work on, but it's accessibility to equipment as well. So you
yeah,
can see, this huge boom of people who are making frame loom weavings,
yeah,
woven wall hangings, small frame looms, stuff like all of that stuff is booming because these techniques, people want to do these techniques, but they have to do it with a different color palette, maybe something that's a little bit more modern, more fresh, revitalized color palette. But the other aspect of that is that these frame looms are less expensive, they're more
yeah,
accessible, they're easier to get your hands on,
yeah,
all of that kind of stuff. It's really tricky. Like we're thinking about how, real estate is really expensive, rent is really expensive. It's unlikely, I think, that in this day and age, you're going to be like, I'm going to get a place that is going to have enough rooms for me and my family and also an extra room so I can put this loom in the room.
right.
It's unlikely, right? It's very unlikely to have access to a lot of the space that's required for these looms. So I've been thinking a lot about this idea of like more of the sharing economy. I feel like there needs to be a new model of making this equipment available to people.
Yeah,
So locally we have sewing studios that have like a room full of 10 different sewing machines. You can come in and you can rent a machine by the hour, stuff like that. I feel very much like you could do that for weaving looms, spinning wheels, do spinning wheel rentals. We used to do spinning wheel rentals at our studio. But if like a place where you could have weaving looms set up where people could come weave for, rent it for a couple of hours a week or something like that. I feel like, yeah, there needs to be a little bit more of that kind of model. And then once everybody's hooked, then they will find a way to make it into their lives, you know?
so you're saying we should make the first one free? Pay and pay and pay.
No, I think about like how here, like where I learned to weave here in the lower mainland of Vancouver here, there was a place called Place des Arts, and I was taking my weaving lessons there. And they had a room full of table looms that you could take home with you. And then there
Mm-hmm.
was like 4 or 5 floor looms, everything from
Mm-hmm.
like a Leclerc nihilist. There was a counterbalance loom. There was a compact folding loom that's kind of like a baby wolf loom.
Uh-huh.
They had all of these looms available for people to like borrow and try out.
Yeah.
And once you've got that feeling,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
like, you can never let that feeling go. I'm like, I have to have that in my life. So
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
But with floor looms, there's a portability issue. I mean, if you only get to weave on your project once a week, that might not be enough. And once the warp is on and somebody's project is on, that loom's not available for somebody else to play with.
Yeah.
I think you're right. A maker space kind of approach sounds fabulous. And
Hmm.
I believe Jane Patrick, my wonderful boss, has helped get some of those started in the Boulder area, like at the Boulder Public.
Fantastic.
But there had
Yeah. So I did see another yarn store was doing this where they would have like one loom specifically for like towels and
mm-hmm,
another specifically for like blankets or something like that. And so they would put on the big long warp for you, and then you come in and then you weave your scarf or you weave your whatever chunk of fabric, and the weaving doesn't take that long, right? Maybe like
Right.
a couple hours,
Right.
cut it off and then retie to the front, and then the next person can come and do it. So,
Yeah.
having that available to people. Yeah.
Yeah, that can even be done with the rigid heddle looms.
Hmm.
So accessible to my
Yeah.
mind. I mean, that was how I started weaving, was on a rigid heddle because it was a lot less expensive and it would fit in my small grad school apartment.
Yeah.
And I had all this yarn I'd spun. Oh, how about teaching kids? Have your kids embraced craft?
I am teaching my kids to weave right now. So my son finished a little thing off a little frame loom, like one of those watchmakers from Pearl and Loop. So he did
Yep.
that. And then when I was a kid, I had a Fisher Price toy loom. It's a rigid heddle loom. It's like a fully functioning rigid heddle loom, but I don't know, it's from the 1980s. They don't make this anymore. But my mom found this toy, and so I've been letting my daughter use it. So she's been weaving on it, and we've been talking about selvages. She's like very concerned about her selvages. She's like, these
My
don't look very
gosh.
good. And we're like, well, we can make it into a bag and we'll cut off the selvages and it'll all
Mm-hmm.
be fine. She's like, okay.
Yep. Yep. Sew it into a pillow cover. Oh my,
That's right.
4 and she's worried about her selvages.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
She's
might be
been,
the
she's been
best thing I've
watching me
heard all
weave
day.
since she was a baby.
That's great. What about teaching textile arts in school settings? If
Yeah.
any of us could do whatever our day jobs are to get kids spinning, weaving, knitting, whatever in schools, what do you think that could be?
Absolutely. So I have one of my girlfriends, she teaches a Montessori class, grade 4, 5, 6. And this is before COVID, but we would give her like a whole bunch of knitting yarn, and they all learned how to knit. They had their own knitting club at lunchtime, and she said it was adorable because they sat around and they're having like a little knitting night, these grade 4, 5, 6 girls and boys, and knitting, learning to knit, made themselves scarves. The scarves got donated to a local charity.
Nice.
So that was all really, really great. But it's just, yeah, it is providing a lot of the tools and materials for the kids. We brought in fiber so that way we could explain to them, where does fiber come from?
Uh-huh.
How is it prepared? How is it made into yarn? All of these kinds of things. They were all fascinated. I think it is really just exposure to a lot of these things. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you see a lot of, oh, only girls do that stuff? Or has that,
No, there was a boy who came to the girls were doing the knitting, but the boy came up and he stood next to me and he's like, I know how to weave. I have a loom at home. I know how to weave. I'm like, oh, okay, that's awesome. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, in the Middle Ages, it was more common for the women to do the spinning and fiber prep and dyeing, and until it became a business. And then the men would do the weaving because the startup costs of the weaving business were so high that
Hmm.
you needed to be able to get loans, et cetera, et cetera. So it was more often men who were doing the weaving. There was only one all-female guild in medieval Paris, and it was the Silk Spinners Guild in the 14th century. And even they had to have a man at the head of the guild because that was just how things worked. Girls can't run businesses and do that sort of thing. So, anywho,
Oh, I love it.
um,
I love seeing them weave because, the action of working with your hands and the fiber arts, it instantly calms them down, right? And
yes,
I can hear them. They're going over, under, over, under, over, under, over,
yeah.
under. Like it's very meditative. You see that immediately in kids.
Well, and they have to focus.
Hmm.
I mean, in this world of ours where there's stimuli everywhere, being able to just focus on one thing seems like a really good thing to me. I don't have kids, so I'm just guessing here, but that's
Yeah,
my
no,
gut.
absolutely. It's great. Yeah. I mean, at first, my daughter, she's 4 now, but at first when she first started weaving, she can maybe do 2 picks and she's like, okay, I'm done, mama. But now it's like more and more and more. And like just this past
Yeah.
weekend, she wove a whole inch and a half. It was great.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I think those were all my questions. Do you have anything you want to tell our audience about the making life, about spinning and weaving, about spinning and weaving week?
Oh yeah, no, yeah, we're very excited about Spinning and Weaving Week. We are doing our own spin in on Zoom. And so if any of your listeners, if it's before Tuesday, October 6th, that's when we're hosting it.
Okay,
But Tuesday, October 6th at 10 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, we do have a spin in on Zoom that'll be happening. And so I can send you the link. And then if you want to share
great.
it with everybody who's interested in joining, that would be lovely. But yeah, we're spinning and doing more spinning courses for the School of Sweet Georgia. They're going to be
Great.
coming out this fall. And yeah, and I'm doing more weaving classes for this fall. So it's really
Excellent.
just trying to like encourage more people to try to step over from sort of the knitting world and discovering how yarn is made, what you can do with that yarn,
Yeah,
lots of different things that you can do, and sort of opening up this world to people who already enjoy yarn and fiber, but showing them, all of the other things that might be possible. Trying to get people intrigued.
great. That all sounds lovely. Well, it's been a total joy talking to you, and uh, wow, happy Spinning and Weaving Week 2020.
Thank you, you too. Thank you so much.